Welcome to Chemo Coffee Talk, your weekly dose of resilience, inspiration, and a whole lot of heart. I'm Carly Fouth, a triple-negative breast cancer survivor who started this podcast right from my chemo chair, and now I'm coming to you straight from my kitchen. Whether you're fighting the fight yourself, supporting a loved one, or just here for a little encouragement, you're in the right place. Every week, we'll chat with my cancer-fighting buddies, caregivers, and experts, sharing stories that are real, raw, and uplifting. So grab your favorite mug, brew up some resilience, and let's dive into a conversation filled with humor, hope, and the unstoppable human spirit. I'm committed to continuing this podcast to reach and help as many people as possible. And any kind of support makes a huge difference. So subscribe and share it with friends. Your support keeps me going and helps me spread hope even further. Thanks for listening. Hello, Chemo Coffee Talk listeners. So a little backstory on this episode. So this is probably one of the episodes that has stuck with me the most. I'm talking today to Louise Butcher, and you may have seen her. I posted about her on Facebook. You may have seen her on social media. She is the Topless runner. So she had a double mastectomy. I'm going to let her tell her story in the interview, in the episode, but she is a topless runner who had a double mastectomy and now is running with no shirt on to bring awareness to how Good afternoon, Chemo Coffee Talk listeners. Thank you for tuning into another episode. And I wanted to record a little preface to this episode because it's quite a story. So I am talking to Louise Butcher today, and it was a huge get for me because I think she's my hero. She had a double mastectomy, breast cancer survivor, and now she runs Topless. And I'm going to let her share her story. But here is what happened. We did the interview, and it was so awesome that I couldn't stop thinking about it. And when I went back to edit it, half of the interview was just me going, oh, yeah, great, Her audio did not pick up. So I went into a complete panic. I felt terrible. I mean, it's not easy being the creator, guest getter, editor of your own podcast. I really wish I had somebody to edit this and had a producer. But anyway, I'm a one-woman show. But I reached out to Louise. I told her the situation, and she was kind enough to schedule some time to come back on the show to record again the following week. However, she was in a garden, a beautiful garden. It was a really nice day, and the reception and the connection was not so great. So when I went back to edit the interview again, half of the interview was gone again. And I didn't even tell Louise this because it's too embarrassing and I didn't want her to think I was a complete mess up. So what I did was I tried to piece together the two interviews of what I got. So I did my best editing that I could. And the interview kind of ends abruptly, right at a really good point. So you're going to hear me again when the interview ends, but it's such a great interview, and you don't have to have breast cancer or have gone through a double mastectomy to get something out of this. I think every woman should listen to this interview. It's all about body confidence and appreciating who you are and overcoming fear. It's so lovely. So Louise, I'm sure you're listening to this. Thank you so much for your generosity and kindness for offering to come back on my show again. And I hope I did this interview justice, but I think I did. And for everyone else, you can follow Louise on Instagram and Facebook. Enjoy the show. It's a good one. I am so excited. Before I hit record, I told my guest, Louise Butcher, that I feel like we would be best friends because when I saw her story, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like something I could see myself doing. So I am so excited to have Louise join me on the podcast today. It took us a while to get our schedules to match up because we're both super busy, but she's here today. And Louise, I'm just so happy to have you here.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me on. It's just, it's brilliant, isn't it? When we connect, love it.
I love it. So why don't you start out by, for those of So there might be listeners who have not heard your story. So why don't you share a little bit about your journey from being diagnosed with lobular breast cancer to becoming known as your town's topless runner? Tell us a little
Yeah,
about that.
it's an interesting story. But so I was diagnosed in 2022 in April, and it was a shock because I'd had a clear mammogram 3 weeks earlier, which didn't show up the lobular breast cancer because obviously it hides, doesn't it? And it doesn't show up on mammograms very well. So I was devastated. It was a massive shock. I went into, so I call it cancer land, where you feel like you've been taken out of your life and you're looking back in at your old life and you are lit in such darkness. It was a very, and I was grieving as well when I lost my breast. I was grieving the person I was, grieving the life I had. So I had a mastectomy in the June and then another mastectomy in the August because they originally took the left breast off, but I couldn't cope with one breast. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with one breast. I didn't want to have reconstruction because of all the invasive surgeries, and I just wanted to move forward. And I advocated to have that second breast off so I could be flat. And then I ran a marathon 6 weeks after my second mastectomy because throughout the journey I'd been running for health anxiety. So I'd had before the cancer I'd had health anxiety, which is like hypochondria. And the running made me feel like, well, I can't be ill because I'm running, so I must be really fit. But then I got diagnosed with cancer. So that journey had been ongoing throughout both my treatments and my radiotherapy. And it was the only thing that stayed the same. It was
Yeah,
the only thing.
I love that you talk about you ran for anxiety too, because as a runner myself and as somebody who's worked out my entire life, we have that in common is that it's a way for me to cope, especially when things around me are falling apart and I feel like I have no control over anything. I
Yeah.
can come back to that and it gives me a sense of control. So you ran a marathon 6 weeks after your double mastectomy. So when did you get back to running after the surgery to prepare for the marathon?
So yeah, I had the two separate mastectomies. So it was
Okay,
first,
that's right.
yeah.
Yes.
Probably I started pottering around, sort of like walking and then speed walking, maybe 10 days after surgeries. And I felt I had to do that because I think with surgery, moving around is the best option anyway, isn't it? I mean,
100%.
you're sending all the nutrients around, your blood flow is moving. And it was probably 3 weeks after each surgery, I was back to running, which
I
is
like that.
but it's only because I was already running. I was already
That's
fit.
100%
Yeah.
true.
I didn't suddenly go, oh, I'm going to start running now. That would not have worked. It was only because my body kind of went back into it easier.
And because I know the reaction I got from my doctors when I was going back to what I was doing way earlier than they were recommending, but it's because I had this body awareness because I knew my body so well. I knew what it could handle. I was safe. I was careful, but my doctors were kind of like, I think they got to the point that they were just like, she's going to do what she's going to do. But how did your doctors react?
They knew I was a runner, and my surgeon knew I was a runner. So she had an inkling that I would go back to running quite quick. It was the nurses when I had radiotherapy that looked quite shocked because I had the radiotherapy 3 days before I ran the marathon in that week. And they said, oh, you need to sort of rest. And I went, oh, I'm running a marathon. And they just thought I was joking.
Yeah.
But I do believe as well, like it helped with the symptoms. It helped.
Yeah. It totally does. I feel like it helped me heal faster.
Yeah.
Like you said, getting the nutrients, like moving my body, it definitely helped.
Definitely. And also, I think people forget that running is a painkiller, isn't it? The endorphins are painkillers. So in actual fact, once you start getting the endorphins going, as you've done like maybe a mile or 2 miles, the painkilling sticks, it sort of gets into your body and you don't feel as much pain, which gives you that positivity and sort of that get up and go. So, oh my God, it's just for mental and physical health of getting over surgeries.
It's
Recommend it.
100%. Yep, it is. It's the natural painkiller. So tell me a little bit about how the idea of running topless came about and what that first experience was like.
So I wanted to have my breasts off, but it was still devastating because obviously you look at yourself in the mirror and it's kind of like you're grieving your body, your breasts are gone. That probably took around 6 months to really, I didn't get acceptance after 6 months, but I'd started to get used to it. And I'd done like a tiny little short film, which was on a breast cancer site, and they'd said, can someone with a mastectomy come in? It was kind of like a little film. You walk into a dressing room and you look into the mirror at yourself, you sort of take your dress down, and then there's no breasts there, and you're looking whether you're going to put on one of those fake rubber breasts. And I remember when I looked, and I'd seen myself in the mirror, but it was the dress coming down, and the crew kind of the expectation of seeing breasts and there weren't any there, which sent me into a massive panic attack. And I literally broke down on set. And I remember I went backstage because I was a mess. And the script writer, I said, you feel pity, don't you? You feel pity for me because I've got no breasts. And she said, no, we're in awe of your courage. And those words just changed my mindset like that. And it was from that moment, I was like, okay, so maybe it's the pity's coming from me. Maybe it's if I can change the narrative of that, then it will start to become something that goes out into society. And then the pity, it was kind of like you can only really change the perception outside if you're changing it from inside. And then I'd looked around, and the mastectomy, the flat closure surgery all had such negativity. And the surgeon had said to me, we recommend you have reconstruction because it's the research, not her opinion. The research says that the mental health of a woman will be negative if you stay flat. And I thought, that's not right. That there's something, I've got to change this. So I was running another marathon that April, and I wanted to do it for a valid reason rather than just running it because I'd already run one. And I thought, I know, I'll become an experiment and I'll just run it topless, because then you've got the two perceptions challenging each other. So you've got the strength, resilience, determination, power, all these really amazing qualities in a person. And then you've got this person who's supposed to have pity with the breasts. And I thought, isn't that going to be an amazing flip? Because that's going to confuse people in the sense of what do I feel? Because I can't feel pity because she's running a marathon.
That is, I love that. And you're probably very similar to me, where the worst thing that I want somebody to, the worst thing I can think about somebody feeling for me is pity. Like it flips my stomach. It makes me angry, and I get my back up. So I love that you took control of the situation, because I talk a lot about that, is like, especially with my cancer journey, I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. I realized that I could be in control of the narrative. I wasn't going to let cancer control my narrative. I got to write my own story. So you did the same thing in such a powerful way. To be honest, I have thought about that, especially when I went flat, and seeing, like, being very comfortable with my scars in the mirror. It hasn't really bothered me. I'm kind of proud of it, but I've always held back a little bit because I am afraid of people feeling sorry for me. So the fact that you did that and you took control of it is like, I just want to bow down to you. You're like my hero.
Yeah, I mean, as well, what it was from is because my daughter at the time I was diagnosed was 5. And I remember I'd seen so many comments about my grandma had a mastectomy and she hid it away and she was ashamed of it. And obviously the anxiety would have been in her face. And I imagined if my daughter had come into the room and I suddenly had gone like this, or I was covering with the breasts. And I just thought that would be where she would find the trauma in my face. She wouldn't be traumatized by this. It would be my reaction to this. So instead, what I did is when she said, oh, I really like to see your scars, because they're inquisitive, aren't they? And curious kids. And I think what's really good is when you show them, their imagination's going mad and they're probably thinking all these awful things. But actually, when they see them, they're like, well, she actually went, oh, kind of, is that it? Because I think she expected loads of blood and she'd said, had they cut them off with scissors? And I was like, what are you thinking? The hidden causes the anxiety. It causes it. And that's what I thought, right, so that's happened. And I now am starting to accept me in the mirror. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to get all this judgment and all these comments, because I knew there was going to be negative, positive. I knew that was why I did it, to get the discussion. And I'm going to be like a guinea pig for that. And I'm going to see where that journey takes me, because I'd started to accept it. So it wouldn't bother me personally. Mm-hmm. And as I did the journey, the acceptance became more, because I wasn't hiding it. I was owning it. And also,
when you're comfortable with it.
Comfortable with it, how can you care about the judgment? Because judgment only affects you when you're not comfortable in yourself, in your own skin, doesn't it?
that's a really good point. And what a good lesson for your daughter. Like, what a great mom moment. That is
Oh,
just,
it was so good.
it's so powerful. That's something that she will carry with her for the rest of her life, I think. And that's great. So let's talk a little bit about the reactions that you've gotten. You just said that there's been good and bad. So tell us a little bit about both the positive and the negative feedback that you've received.
So as I'm running now, because I've done it for 2 years where I live and around, people know who I am. So it's kind of like their reaction has become normalized, which is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
That was what I was doing it for. But obviously on social media, it's a whole different kettle of
Oh,
fish because you've got like my followers and my supporters are amazing. I'll always get positive from them. But then if the reel goes viral and outside of those followers, you're obviously getting loads of different reactions, which is what I want.
yep.
Because also it's written down then as well for other people to see and for people to argue with, or not necessarily argue, but discuss. Why do you think this? Why do you think she should cover up? Why is it inappropriate? Why, do you know? So there, and that's what happens. You'll literally get like a comment, like she needs to cover up, she's a woman. And then you'll get 60 people going, why? And that's just exactly what I wanted. But some of the comments do make me laugh because a lot of them are repeated because there's only a certain amount of comments you can make about this situation. And because it's been going on 2 years, there's been so many thousands that you kind of get similar ones. But the one about the testicles is my favorite because this is when I realized that lots of people weren't listening in biology class at school because they will say, so if a guy has testicular cancer and he has a testicle removed, does that mean he can run around now without pants?
And that is where the interview ended. And I did my best to salvage some of the things we were talking about in the following interview we did, but I couldn't quite get everything to match up. So I thought the best thing to do was for me to just tell you a little bit about the answer that Louise gave me when I asked her my last question, because I really loved her answer. So the last question I asked Louise was, what advice would you offer to other breast cancer survivors who are seeking ways to reclaim their bodies and raise awareness? And Louise told me that she would advise them to pick something new to do. And I love that advice. So picking something that you've never done before your cancer diagnosis. So try not to stick to something maybe that you were doing really well before. So let's say you were running marathons before your cancer diagnosis. Maybe you pick up swimming instead. Try something new so you don't have something that you have the ability to compare yourself to who you were before. Doesn't mean you can't still run marathons, but offer yourself the experience of something new, this new version of yourself, and that can be really powerful. And I totally agree because there's a lot of women that I have as clients, and a lot of what happens is when you reach a certain age, menopause, and things don't feel the way they used to, and your body just isn't doing what it used to do, and that can be really hard, and that can lead to some setbacks and a lack of motivation. So that's the advice I give as well to anybody, not even just facing a cancer diagnosis. Don't be afraid to try something new. So I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Again, I wish I was able to be a little bit better of an editor to get the second part of what we talked about put together, but I think the main points that Louise talked about are in the interview. And thank you for listening. If you would like to follow Louise, and I highly recommend it, you can follow her on Instagram. I'll put her Instagram handle in the show notes, as well as Facebook. And Louise has a book coming out. You can sign up to get a pre-release copy. So it's you can buy a book before it's officially released. So I will have that information in the show notes as well. But thanks again for listening, and thanks to Louise if you're listening. Thank you for spending so much time with me. It was a true honor. Thanks for joining me today on Chemo Coffee Talk. I hope this conversation left you feeling inspired, uplifted, and a little more connected. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with someone who might need it, and leave a review. It helps me reach more people looking for hope and resilience. And remember, no matter what you're facing, you're never alone. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep moving forward.